Well, it's time to say good evening and welcome to yet another Black Opal in association with the Lord's Taverners webinar. I can certainly say that for those of us stuck in the UK still, after what feels like about 3,922 years in isolation, it is a huge relief to be back on this webinar and talking about something that is familiar to us all, the lovely game of cricket. We have certain of the usual suspects with us again tonight, one or two new faces as well, and we have also to be a little bit patient for the legend that is Graeme Swann, who is currently in Abu Dhabi, where the Wi-Fi is, to use the technical term, rubbish. So he's there apparently for the Super 10s. He'll be joining us, all being well, when he's worked out a link. But in the meantime, so in order across the screen as I look at it, Gladstone Small is there. Gladys, how are you?
Still alive, mate.
Well, that's all we need to know. That's all we need to know. Warmly tucked up in that blue sweater. Jonathan Trott. Jonathan, welcome to you. You're isolating in Chennai.
Yeah, this is day 2, and so hopefully we'll be allowed out, if all tested negative, in a few days' time. So trying to keep ourselves busy and active, if you like.
How's it going?
That's okay. Not too bad, thanks. I'm a little bit different. It's my first bout of sort of isolating. I think the England side have done it a few times. In various places. They've been South Africa and Sri Lanka before now, and then they still have to do the 6 days when they arrive here tomorrow, hopefully. Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
So what can you do in the room? I mean, can you, for instance, take those paintings behind you down, put them up again? Can you turn the light on and off? Maybe sort of move the bed a bit. Is that it?
Well, they've given all of us a skipping rope. The ECB sports sort of physios and stuff like that. They gave us a skipping rope and a strength band. So I've been doing a bit of skipping, thinking I'm Muhammad Ali, sort of try to do it on one leg and then changing feet. But I've tripped up a few times. But it's been very interesting. I'm doing a bit of work on my level 4 coaching, and a few other bits and bobs.
I mean, looking at the way they've been coping in Australia for the Australian Open tennis, I mean, there have been players there whacking tennis balls against upturned mattresses. Have you been hitting cricket balls against the mattress in that room?
Oh, no, I haven't been hitting the mattress at all, to be honest. But the days of hitting cricket balls is certainly gone for me. It's now about throwing balls, David, as a coach. And I've got to warm up the shoulder because certainly in this day and age, you're expected to throw quite a lot as a coach. We have these sort of contraptions that you put the ball in and sort of flick the ball out a lot quicker than you can throw, so that the players like those, and you end up throwing quite a lot to them.
Okay, and our final panelist so far, until Graeme Swann works out the internet, Simon Wilde, Sunday Times, co-author of many a very, very fine book and one or two really excellent ones with me, fellow resident in Hampshire. Simon, how are you tonight?
I'm very well, thank you, David. Very nice to see you. I've been watching the cricket on the TV, obviously, and getting up at 4:15 each morning. So that's been a bit grim, but we've got a week off before the next one. So that's quite nice, really. But I'm missing the sun in Sri Lanka and India, obviously.
Actually, that's a good question. I wonder how many of us have actually watched all of the cricket in Sri Lanka. I mean, Trotty, you've probably got an unfair advantage there. Gladys, how much have you watched?
I've watched quite a bit of it, man. I was one of those who set my alarm 4:30 in the mornings, and it's been quite intriguing watching. I've been quite enjoyed it. I've felt as bring a bit of sunshine in on those cold mornings that we've had, particularly with the snow we've had at the weekend. And it was because obviously I enjoy the traveling side of going around these days, and Sri Lanka is one of my favorite places, and obviously that the TV director from Goal was having lots of fun, intriguing us English supporters back here, showing us all that really picturesque ground at Goal. So that made me just hanker on for wanting to be back out on the travels even more.
Yeah. I keep getting a green telephone up on my screen, which suggests it might be Swanee trying to contact us in his own inimitable 007 style from Abu Dhabi. But we'll let
Hello, David Gower.
Hey, Graeme Swann, a very good evening to you. I'm afraid we can't see.
I think you might have to just put up with my voice and not my face, because I can't work this out for love nor money.
Well, then we're definitely very lucky.
Well, okay. Well, actually, well, Trott has summed it up in an instant there. Graeme, very good evening to you then. Apart from
Hello.
internet troubles, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm in hotel isolation in Abu Dhabi, and the hotel room is far nicer than my own house, so I'm pretty happy.
An extraordinary coincidence. Trott is in hotel isolation in Chennai as well. It must be a worldwide chain that you're all staying in. Let us talk about Sri Lanka. Jonathan, come to you first on this. I mean, first of all, a very impressive performance to win yet again in Sri Lanka, take the series 2-0. Secondly, obviously, fantastic stuff from Joe Root as captain, as batsman, as the leading batsman. Talk us through your impressions of all that first.
I think it's a great tour to go on before coming to India. You'd say the Indian side, having watched the Australian series, are very strong team. Certainly on their home patch are going to be extra difficult to beat. But I think they'll be, chomping at the bit, having won in Sri Lanka, which is never an easy thing to do. But I just think the way that they knocked off those runs there towards the end certainly will give them a lot of confidence arriving on these shores when they get on the plane tomorrow. But a lot of the time you'll come to India and play a lot of warm-up games and not face decent opposition. I'm not saying that Sri Lanka series was a warm-up, but it puts them in great sort of form, you like, and as a side, fully confident.
Simon, just ask you quickly, as the sort of the impartial judge, obviously as the Sunday Times correspondent, you look at both sides evenly. I mean, how bad was Sri Lanka? I mean, yes, I mean, we're quite right to give credit where it's absolutely due, to Root, to the spinners, to Anderson, to Broad, to all the guys who produced the right sort of performances to win that series under pressure. Make no bones about it. I think we all understand how playing in Sri Lanka is a tough ask, especially on that pitch, for instance, on the final day. But how bad was Sri Lanka, given they were in home conditions and should have been able to produce a little bit more?
Well, I don't think this is a vintage Sri Lankan team, is it? But they've got a few class players, Matthews with a bat and Buldinia with the ball, for example. But there was a shortage of depth there. It's not like you were bowling at Kumar and Mahela all the time. But having said that, they still pushed England quite hard, I thought, They lost 2-0 because they had a batting collapse in each innings, in each match, didn't they? Once. Yeah. But they pushed England hard the rest of the time. So they weren't that bad, but they weren't a top class team, I don't think, really, by their own standards. And India would obviously be a notch above this, but they were, without patronising them, they were a good workout for England with India coming up. England will feel that they got something out of this series. Definitely, they were pushed hard enough to have to work for it. The spinners learnt a few things, and if you look at the averages, take out Joe Root, and the run scoring chart's not that impressive, to be honest.
Yeah, there is that. Graeme, how closely were you watching all this?
Yeah, I watched both Test matches. I'm going to be less diplomatic than Simon and Trotty can be, and I'm just going to say that was an absolute warm-up. You're not going to get easier victories than that on an absolute minefield. In that last Test, they should have been able to defend 160, 170. With Buldinia, who's a world-class spinner, the off he was bowling badly. Joe Root out cheaply. Sri Lanka should have won that game. They weren't good enough to do it. Let's face it, that Sri Lanka team is not vintage at all. It is a warm-up for the Indian Test series. Trotty, you've got your work cut out, mate, for me, because Joe Root is brilliant and is back to his ultimate best, but there's some glaring technical deficiencies from where I see it in the top order, how they're playing the spinners. They need to listen to Trott, whatever he says to him, because especially the opening batsman. And can anyone tell me, while I'm here, why Johnny Bairstow hasn't immediately been recalled and said, actually, we're not going to send you home. Come on, come to India, because we desperately need you in the top three.
All right, before anyone tries to answer that question, we have questions that are sent in from our faithful viewers, those joining us on this webinar. And there's one actually which comes from Mike Mitchell, says exactly that. Why do the Test selectors have doubts about Johnny Bairstow? Well, I don't think they do have doubts, whether it be purely as a batsman or as a batsman wicketkeeper. He calls it an instability, and he's alluding to Ed Smith. He says the instability started when Ed Smith became a national selector. And likewise, Ian Holroyd, friend of ours, very good friend of ours, says, why send David Bairstow, man in form and top batsman of spin, home again? I mean, these are sort of new eras in terms of everything. I mean, selection, for instance, I mean, Trott, you come in on this one. Selection has so many different things to take account of nowadays, with bubbles, with red ball, with white ball, man management, the whole thing.
Well, what I think is going to happen is guys are going home for a little bit and then coming back. So I think Johnny will be involved with the white ball stuff at the end of the India series. Yep. Nobody, I think, is doing all tests and the ODIs at the back end. So I think they're splitting it up a little bit. So you'll see Johnny come back into the test squad, I'm pretty sure. Or you'll see a different test squad for the second, for the third and fourth test, I should say, whenever that's selected. So they're just trying to give guys a bit of time at home and not have them in quarantine or isolation periods, the whole winter up until I think the team gets back towards the beginning of April. So it's 3 months away if you do all the tests and ODIs and T20s.
Simon, there is an...
You know what I reckon? I understand that and I can see where they're coming from, but I will straight away say, are we bothered about Test cricket? Do we want to be number one in the world? Because if you're talking about all isolation, a lot of the time that Johnny's been away has been at the IPL. Are you going to let players' pockets, overrule the test side? I think it's skew-whiff thinking, if I'm perfectly honest. I'd much rather Johnny be there for the whole series. And I just don't get it. I don't get why they've made the decision so long ago and they can't immediately go back on it and say, look, actually, Johnny's playing so well at the minute. Our best chance of beating the number one test team in the world at the minute, which India undoubtedly are, is to have him in the team. It's bonkers to me.
Yeah,
the thing is, Swanee, is that Ben Stokes will come back in, so you'll see the likes of him strengthening the side. We've got Rory Burns to come in as well.
Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, so there is that. I think what they're trying to do is make sure that guys don't spend the whole time out here in these conditions, if you like, in these living conditions. So I know
I get that, but Johnny's one of our top six batsmen.
You would not have lasted.
I want him
in isolation. That is for sure.
If we can set up a separate,
put my mortgage on.
If we can just set up a separate channel for Jonathan and Graeme to have this discussion, pretty handy. Simon and Gladstone, we can have a quick discussion. So I was going to ask you again, as the sort of dispassionate observer, because someone like Johnny, who's in good form, had 2 good test matches in Sri Lanka. If you were Johnny, whatever you've done with IPL and the rest of it, and you've always said to people you want to be part of the test team, you'd want to be there. Well, I would want to be there now, following up that good form.
Yeah. Well, I think there's 2 things there. The IPL, allowing these players to go to the IPL is okay. There's the issue of allowing them because of the sheer amount of money they receive. But with the World T20 coming up at the end of this year, I think England are very keen that these guys are prepared for that tournament. So the IPL is perfect for that. So I think there's a special reason why the management would like to see these guys at the IPL. Because the World T20 is probably as important as winning test matches against India and Australia. But there is an issue, one of your questioners raised about Bairstow being destabilised since Ed Smith came in, and that there does seem to be a correlation there. But Ed admits that he was keen to get Butler back into the test team, and Butler can do no wrong in Ed's eyes. And Johnny's paid a bit of a price there, I think. But Johnny's own form did deteriorate at about the same time. His test average dropped to the low 20s, I think. So he didn't help himself. I think there's quite a complicated situation there, really. But so I have some sympathy for the way Johnny's been handled. Okay,
let's leave the Bairstow question. It's a bit like the Irish question. It'll always be there. It'll never go away. Let's leave the Bairstow question for now. What about the openers? So top 3, because we all know whether you're playing, whichever era you play, and you know that going to Asia can be tricky. As a young batsman, Sibley, Crawley, Lawrence, young batsmen experiencing those conditions, not exactly for the first time in the modern era, because there are ways of getting to Asia with A teams and other ways too. But it's a stern test. We know that. Jonathan, we know it's a stern test. We saw Sibley come through with a half century at the 4th attempt in Sri Lanka. We also know that India, you might play on some very good pitches. You might play on pitches that will turn a bit, but the pressure will be immense there. What's your feeling about how that top order is going to develop over the next few weeks?
Well, I think you'll see Rory Burns come into the frame and push for selection. I think it all depends on the balance of the side as well, who they go with. But I think for Zach Crawley, would have probably been his first time playing out in those conditions, something very new to him. But he's the type of guy who learns pretty quickly. So I'd certainly back him to get a few runs in India. The other thing I would say is I think the wickets are going to be different in India. I think they're going to try and get their seamers into the game. We heard the report saying they're going to leave some grass on the wicket here in Chennai, which the last time I was in Chennai was during the World Cup, and we played 2 games. And out of the 100 overs we would have bowled, I think we had a short leg for about 50 of them in an ODI. So it is notorious here for spin here, but they fancy themselves with their seamers, and that will bring us into the game, I feel. As for Dominic Sibley, it was great to see him get some runs, and hopefully he can take that confidence, because I know he was low on confidence a little bit, but he sure looked good yesterday.
Swanee, what's your view when you say, for instance, okay, you've stated very clearly that you saw those Sri Lanka tests as a warm-up. Well, okay, it's a good thing to have test matches as a warm-up rather than sort of playing in the middle of nowhere like Jamshedpur against East Zone, that sort of thing. And it does get a few overs under the belt. From the spinner's point of view, we need an assessment of Bess and Leach, but at least they've managed to get some overs under their belts, and also, of course, some wickets in the book as well, which does confidence a whole lot of good.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with how Jack Leach bowled the whole series. He is steady Eddie, isn't he? He's not a massive turn on the ball, but he's got it on a dime. He doesn't mess around. He could do with an arm ball, but I'm happy with him. Dom Bess got lucky in his first innings, but he kept fighting. He knew he was under the pump. He knows he's not consistent yet, but he's a young lad and he's getting better. So there's a lot of criticism going his way, and I think from the outside it looks like he takes it on board a little bit. So he needs to shut out those nagging doubts as quickly as he can. But these guys can bowl. They've got to go to India now with these wickets under their belt, just thinking about those wickets they got. Yes, they're on, spitting cobra of a pitch where they should take wickets, but they did. They bowled Sri Lanka out for 120 in that last innings. Arguably, Sri Lanka bowled themselves out for 120, but the spinners did their job. And so they have to, stop listening to anyone saying they're not consistent, they're not this, they're not that, and just go with it. Go to India with absolute open mind, saying it's going to turn, I'm going to take wickets, we're going to win. It might not happen that way, but they have to believe in themselves.
In general terms, Simon, we always think about India, and Jonathan's raised a very good point already. We always think about India as good flat pitches that will tend to turn, not straight away necessarily. For instance, England's last tour there, they played on some very good batting pitches, but found India making 600 plus, and found batting towards the end of a game tough. We're assuming that it's going to be typical in the conditions, but Jonathan's raised this point already about the strength of the Indian seam attack at the moment. How much of a difference do you think that'll make to the Indian team approach?
Well, quite a lot, I think, because they have got a really good seam attack. They've got two teams of seam, two sets of seamers, really, haven't they? As we saw in Australia, because so many were injured, and also they've lost Jadeja. He broke his hand in Australia. He's going to miss probably the first 2, possibly the whole series. Some of the Indian papers are suggesting. So that puts a lot on Ashwin. I mean, Kuldeep Yadav could play as well, but his record's a bit sketchier. So I think that they might well look to their seamers. I could well see that happening, and they won't have these pitches won't have had much cricket on them, will they? Because of what's been happening. That's a new stadium. We don't know much about that. So I think England have got to be careful not to assume what they're going to see. But as Trotty's saying there, the reports of grass on the pitch at Chennai. That's a clue there, perhaps.
What's the way to win in India, Jonathan? I mean, you've been there on a winning tour. Sometimes people find me just looking at you. Okay, here's the rub. Looking at your figures on that tour, which was what 2012 was it? I forget now, but
11.
11. Slow start. Finished up with hundreds in where was it? Nagpur. Yeah. When you had to draw the game on, actually, it was a really flat pitch. I have to say that it was a shitty.
Thanks,
sorry, it was not. Yeah, beautifully played, of course.
It was. I thought you batted bloody well, Trotty. To be honest, unbelievable, Gower.
No, I was going to say. Actually, no. I remember watching that, and it was a dreadful pitch because it hardly bounced above sort of ankle height.
Yeah,
but
at
the
they
same
actually
time,
only selected one seamer. They played 3 spinners. They played Paresh Chawla, the leg spinner, and Ashwin played. They only played Ishant Sharma as their seamer. So I remember that. Yeah, it was an interesting decision because I think they expected it to break up. They'd designed it to actually do that, but for some, it never actually did. The ball was skidding on, and Ian Bell also got a very fine 100 that game. I think everything just clicked, if you like. And the interesting thing about that tour was we were 1-0 down after the first test at Ahmedabad, and we were up against the wall. Alistair Cook got 300s in the first 3 test matches, and Graeme and Monty Panesar spun us to victory, if you like. But the innings, I remember the innings in Mumbai that Kevin played was probably the best test innings I'd ever watched live or been part of as a side.
Yeah.
His innings at Mumbai after 2 test matches before the whole Texgate with the South Africans and Andrew Strauss and that sort of stuff. So there were some phenomenal performances on that tour, and Graeme was certainly one of those as well.
Well, I mean, I remember commentating on it and watching the turnaround because Mumbai and Kolkata, the 2 games we won. I mean, it's a very, very fine turnaround, but it needs someone to do what Alistair did, what KP did, Kevin the Kev.
Yeah.
And you've got a man in form in Joe Root, who you hope will continue that form. Obviously from his point of view as a captain, he'll want to continue that form. But also you need sort of someone else to join the party, don't you? I mean, you can't just rely on Joe to continue that and sort of take the onus all by himself to make all those runs. Because from previous experience, from your experience, you need big scores in India.
Well, you need big runs. And I think all 4 of those test matches, there's 100 scored by English batsmen. And so I think that is crucial. I think Alistair Cook's first tour and the way that he played was phenomenal. And then when he missed out in the last one, myself and Ian Bell were lucky enough to get some runs and get us across the line. And the first victory in India for, I think it was longer than it actually been done in the Ashes. So I think it was longer than the 23 years or 22 years.
Okay, Jonathan, quiz question for you. Who was the previous captain to win in India?
20. Did you captain England, David? Was it you?
I'll open the question up to the floor. Swanee, got any ideas?
I don't know. I think he was a handsome devil.
I forget what you. 84-5. 84-5. Yes, it was me.
Okay. What was the score?
2-1.
And where did you play the tests?
We lost in Mumbai, which was traditional.
Was that at the Wankhede or the Brabant Stadium?
The Wankhede Stadium, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost there. And actually, it's the same sort of thing, because the point I'm going to make at the end of it is this, that you have to sort of kind of get used to India every time. You have to get used to new bowlers, new spinners, whatever it might be. On this tour, it might be a bit different. We had a fellow called Laxman Sivaramakrishnan who got 13 wickets in Mumbai and about 6 more in the next 4 test matches. We went to Delhi and won there, managed to win on the 5th day. We had a very boring draw in Kolkata, which took about 3 weeks to finish. We went to Madras, to Chennai, where actually they made a pitch which carried through nicely. We had Neil Foster in good form. We had double hundreds from Fowler, from Gatting, so runs on the board. And again, makes the point, you need your best players to produce some big scores. And in the final game in Kanpur, for some reason, they produced the flattest pitch of all time. We had a very nice draw and said, thank you very much, we'll take the trophy. But that was a very special time. Graeme, what's your recipe for winning in India?
My recipe, I think Trotty hit it on the head, massive runs. What we did in that 2012 series, the first test match, and I'm not having a dig at Samit Patel here, but we played Samit as a second spinner when Monty was in the squad. Yeah. And there was always that, we need extra batting going down to 7-8. I think the reason we won there, we put the onus on the batsmen to score the runs, and they did that. And that's the whole time we were very successful in that England era, was because the batsmen were scoring runs and scoring massive runs. We weren't picking numbers 7 or 8 to chip in with 30s and 40s. They were just a bonus. If you leave the top 6 to score the runs, if you say that is your job, full stop, the bowlers take the wickets, you score the runs, that's when you get a good team. There's no reason why England can't do that, with Stokes coming back in, with the recalled Johnny Bairstow after this call that the selectors realise that I'm right and they get on the phone. That'll happen. England can score big and then let the bowlers try and bowl teams out. It's going to be tricky. They've got the seam. Honestly, if they play seam, leave grass on the wicket and try and have a seam off, that plays into England's hands. Broady and Jimmy are as good as their steamers. Let's face it. spin bowling, they've got the edge. So let's hope they do leave grass on the wicket.
Okay, on that point, obviously the events of the last month pan out a bit like this. India win in Australia by playing some extraordinary cricket and overcoming an attack that is deemed to be as good as any in the world, a seam attack on home conditions in Australia. England win in Sri Lanka. So India obviously have batsmen who have technique and determination and courage and all the rest of it against pace, which means they will fancy themselves to counter England's seam attack. And they're at home, which obviously always tends to count for a bit. So I think this is a sort of fascinating equation. If you sort of put all this in the computer, how does it all work out, Simon?
There's also an added dichotomy here.
Okay.
India would in Australia without Kohli. Don't forget, Kohli went back to India after the first Test match, which they lost, and so he's coming back into the team that did well without him. And King Kohli, he's a fantastic player, but he's gonna might be feeling a little bit of unnerved by what happened when he was on the watch in Australia.
Yeah, good point. I've got a question for Trotty, really.
Beautiful.
Which is, what is the balance of England's team? Because I was looking at how England set themselves up in India 4 years ago when they lost 4-0, as it happens. But they had 2 all-rounders effectively in Moeen and Stokes, and they had 4 other frontline bowlers. So you got 6 bowlers in that team. And they needed them because India scored so many runs. But they had a decent balance because Moeen and Stokes were scoring runs as well as bowling. So do England do that this time? Do they have 4 bowl? So basically Moeen and Stokes bat in the top 7, and then you have 4 other bowlers. Is that how they?
I think sometimes you can almost have too many options and confuse yourself. I think as a coaching group or as a captain, it's nice to have the options, but sometimes you need to the guys who've been selected need to do the job. Sometimes in a session, it's very difficult to get through 6 bowlers, maybe, especially if one's bowling well. So sometimes you feel that it's nice to have that. I think that in the squad, but I just think it confuses everything. I think you'd like to be pretty clear on the selections. Depends whether Mo's, recovered fully and is available for selection, first of all. But also I think the way that Bess and Leachy bowl were really good. Plus you have Rooty can bowl, but a spinner picked up towards the end there. So it depends, I think, a lot on the wickets as well, at the number of bowlers that you go with. And I think it's interesting with Sam and Ben, adds an interesting dynamic to the balance of the side when it comes to the seam option. So Ben obviously balances the side really well, and it's going to be great to have him back.
And Wokes, for example.
Exactly. I mean, Wokes is fresh, hasn't played at all. So that's the added advantage of having those 3 all-rounders, if you like. And I think England are very, very lucky. So it's always nice to have that headache when it comes to selection, not who we're going to play, but who's going to be unfortunately left out.
On that point of balance, we've got a couple more questions from our audience, as it were. A regular contributor, Rowan Hando, who's 12 years old and from Hartley Whitney Cricket Club in Hampshire, mentions the fact that Joe Root is in great batting form, which of course he is. He's also on a hat trick next time he bowls in Test cricket. Why doesn't he bowl more often to support Bess and Leach? And also for Swanee here, Richard Todd on Leach and Bess, he says, what are the chances of them repeating that performance from Sri Lanka in India? And what advice do you have for them bowling in India? So put the 2 together, Graeme.
Well, firstly, Joe Root is a brilliant part-time spinner who can come on when you just need to break up an innings or whatever and pick you up a wicket. He will always be that. He can never be more than that. If you say, right, we're only going to go with 1 spinner because Rooty can bowl the overs, whatever, that will completely diminish what Rooty gives you with the bat. He doesn't like the extra pressure. He's perfect to come on. So, yes, great, he can come on when things aren't going well. Whether Bess and Leach can repeat what they did in Sri Lanka, I think it's going to be tough for them because the wickets will not be as spinner-friendly as those 2 pitches in Gaul. However, there's no reason why they can't just run up and do a job. Go in. Leach just needs to bowl on the spot. Just keep going, make people play every ball, pick up wickets, go 1.5 and over. You can easily do that against India. They will not get after you if you're bowling well. They'll just be patient and they'll block you. Best just has to be consistent. So, I doubt if he'll get as lucky as he did in the first innings at Gaul in that first Test again. not many bowlers get that lucky very often. But he carried on. He got another 8 wickets in the series. So you have to just say to him, forget about the pressure of winning a game on the 5th day. Just get out there, land the ball on sixpence, keep going, and we'll see what happens. If the seam bowlers are doing their job, and England at the minute are so well balanced with Stokes coming back in, they can play 3 world-class seam bowlers. So you get the feeling that wickets will fall from the other end every now and again. So the spinners just have to do their role. I'm in the game. I'm going to bowl 50 overs per innings, and I'm going to win the Test match for England. That has to be the mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing, going back to Jonathan's point about the pitch and about what you might find in Chennai in front of you when you walk out on day one is this balance, the balance of the team. And again, coming back to the questions from our viewers, where Neil Carter is asking of Swanee, Trotty and Simon, what are your starting 11s for that first Test match? I mean, obviously, we don't know what the pitch is going to end up. And it's always this classic dilemma. You look at a pitch a week before a game and it's got grass on. Of course, it's got grass on then. We don't know what it's going to be like on, at whatever it is, 10:30 on the first morning of the game. But this balance is interesting because you've got, if the seam attack is going to be much more relevant than normal in India, you've got Anderson in great form, you've got Broad in great form still, you've got the Wokes option, Wood, there's a lot of options there. And will you actually need 2 spinners? That's going to be an interesting one on the day as well. Jonathan, do you want to start that one?
Not really.
Your mate,
Put it this way, start it, you don't have to finish it.
So I think it's going to be 2 of the 3 of Burns, Crawley, Sibley.
Yeah.
I think if we look 2 Test matches ago, or the last one against Pakistan, Crawley got a double 100. So I think he deserves another great way to start. I think Roy Burns hasn't played for a while. It'll be interesting to see how he goes in the nets or if some practice games. So it's pretty tricky to say. And Sibley looked good. I thought he looked okay. But 3 is going to be interesting. But obviously, Bairstow sort of goes. So they might squeeze him in there. Whether Joe Root wants to move up, there's a lot of balancing to go with that. For me, it's pretty tricky to say. And then it goes from there. Because I think Josh Butler's here for 2 tests or 1 test and then goes. And so again, you always want that you want the sort of continuity in selection, but in this day and age, you're not going to get it because of the amount of cricket and the ECB looking after the guys. So you Butler plays, Root plays, Stokes plays. I think they'll go Broad and Anderson. I think they'll go for the experience of the 2 guys together and then try and rest them maybe somewhere along the line in the tour. And then you have your two spinners. Yeah,
I mean, the one thing I would say is that the one thing you always want to try and do in India is get off to a good start. If you're coming back from 1-0 down, it's traditionally very hard to do so.
Yeah.
Simon, what's your take on this selection issue?
Well, I mean, I'd sort of written down here Sibley, Burns, Crawley. That's how they were in the summer, I think. And then Root and Stokes, 4 or 5. And then presumably Lawrence or Pope, if he's fit, at 6. I mean, clearly you could have Lawrence and Pope and drop one of the top 3, as Trotty was maybe suggesting, I don't know. And then you have the keeper at 7 and then 4 bowlers. I mean, that's, if Moeen doesn't bat in the top 7, as we were discussing earlier, then that seems to be how they look, really. And then you have, and the other interesting thing then is, do you, as Jonathan was saying there, Broad and Anderson play? Well, they've made a fantastic case for playing together. But the management have been talking about, we want some pace, so Wood or Archer or Stone. Well, you can't. I don't know that you can get those 3 in if you're having 2 spinners, can you? So, do you sacrifice the fast man, the genuine fast man, to have the old swingers back again together? And they're so good, aren't they? But do you jettison the quick man for that? Because Wood sort of justified himself in Sri Lanka, even though the wickets didn't. He didn't take a lot of wickets, did he? But he justified his presence, I thought.
It's really tricky, and with such big squads, with COVID, because if one person goes down or whatever, the squads are so much bigger than they used to, so selection is so much more complicated. So Woods bowled really well. Is it unfair then, if Archer comes back into the frame and so it gets a little bit confusing, if you like, or from the outside it must look like that, but there is a rotation sort of policy going on.
In fact, Wood's gone home now, hasn't he? He's out of there.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to say. If he was still here, how would the sort of pecking order go? And so it's really interesting, and selection is certainly a lot trickier now. It's always been tricky, but certainly with the current climate, it's a bit of an art to it, if you like.
Well, there's always been an art to it. I mean, one of the matches, hang on,
are day and night. One of the test matches is a day and night test as well.
The third test in Ahmedabad.
And that's probably where, if they do play abroad and Brody and Jimmy together, that's probably the one that they might look to play those two champion bowlers in the same to utilize those evenings conditions with a pink ball. But the pace, even on slow pitches, do not underestimate the use of pace, the threat that having that paceman cause just unhinges the batsman thinking. You might not take wickets, but because the batters know that you got someone coming in there who at 90 miles an hour can get it around your throat, it just causes a little bit of discomfort, doesn't it, Trotty, in the batting lineup? Yeah,
I think you can't buy experience. I think certainly, as you allude to the pink ball, that is where England will fancy themselves. I think they've always been good in those conditions. But I think the Indians will respect those two guys as such, along with Archer thrown into it. I think that produces quite a formidable attack, whichever way you look at it. So if you go with those three guys, Stokes as your fourth seamer and two spinners, I think that's a very, very fine attack.
Swanee, what's your recipe?
No, Trott nailed it by the end there. That's exactly what you do. Jofra Archer cannot be left out of any test. I don't know how much IPL you boys have seen, but Jofra Archer last year especially absolutely put the wind up all the Indian batsmen. I mean, KL Rahul was scoring run after run. Jofra was getting wickets in his first over. Yes, it's 2020. Yes, it's with a hard white ball. He was bowling seriously quick, hostile short bowling. If you get Jofra in your team and say you're bowling, look, it's India, you're bowling 8 overs all day. You need to bowl 95 miles an hour. We don't expect you to 20. We've got Brody, we've got Jimmy and Stokes who can throw it up, and then the two spinners. They're going to bowl all the overs. You are our absolute hitman. You're coming on 2 overs at a time. Mm-hmm. Bowler speed light. He can win test matches. He can get out top players, their best players, by doing that. So that's what I'd go with. I wouldn't rest anyone like that. I'd actually like Trotty to bat, actually, if he's got his kit with him. Come out of time, bat for me.
No, Trot.
Because that was.
I'd like you to bowl, mate.
Honestly, but I was writing down top threes. I was writing Lawrence, Burns, Sibley, Burns, Pope. I was trying to get and Trotty's name is here, and it makes me breathe a lot easier when Trotty's name's down at 3 than anyone else. So, Trotty, please, you get Johnny Bairstow back. KP will probably be commentating. CB can have a bat as well. Cookie might be doing TMS again. I basically picked this team from 2012.
How far back should we go with this? I mean, I'm sure Jardine got runs in India once.
Yes, exactly. Roll the wrist and keep the ball down, Douglas.
We're in danger of getting into Swan impressions here again. There are various questions coming up on the screen in front of me as well now. Someone mentioned IPL there for a moment, and this is something I want to throw into the general argument or general questioning, as it were. IPL was derided at its start. And it took KP, actually, you mentioned Kevin again, took KP to put the case forward that it's great experience for overseas players. It's obviously fantastic experience for Indian players, because look at the team that eventually won in Brisbane a few days ago, a week ago. Made up of youngsters who'd come through IPL, learnt about playing pressure cricket in the IPL, and were thrust into a test match with zero experience and ended up winning it. So there's obviously something good about experiencing that sort of pressure, albeit for 20 overs at a time. The question actually I've got in front of me here from Nick Harmon is that, the likes of Stokes, Butler and co have obviously mastered skills at IPL. What about people like Bess, Leach, Parkinson and others, Verdi, having a crack at maybe not IPL, but some of the other leagues, like the Lanka League or the Bangladesh League, to add to their experience in Asian conditions? What do you reckon, Swanee?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in this day and age, the more cricket you can get out, 2020 cricket is a different game to test matches. We have to. say that these days. You can't say one and two are the same. But yeah, I'm all for it. The IPL, I mean, where Kevin was derided a little bit was when he was saying all those things back then. He should have just said, look, I'm getting minted out of this, so I want to play. That was where people derided him, but he is right.
I think that was on his Twitter account, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the IPL has grown and become an incredible platform, especially for the Indian players.
Yeah,
and the English guys go over there who've done well, who've taken off, and like Johnny did really well until he got weirdly dropped because David Warner obviously still didn't like him. Jofra was incredible over there. The Indian players, the respect that builds up as well. And when they're now facing Jofra, they're not just thinking, who's this guy? Yeah, he can bowl a bit. They've faced him. They've been roughed up by him. They respect him. The Indian public know him and they respect him. That is important in Test cricket because it's a mental game. And to know that the guy running up, for you, has got the edge over someone mentally is a massive thing in India. So, yeah, the IPL is incredible. I don't know about some of the other leagues around the world. They are just pocket lining properties. But who cares? If you want to go and earn some cash, earn some cash.
They've got. If I just jump in there and ask how the IPL, how important it is to the development of players, or certainly players all around the world. If we look at the World Cup in 19, we won. People who performed, we got us in that partnership, Stokes and Butler, when we were chasing those runs. And then when it came to the super over, who did we throw the ball to? One of the most inexperienced international players in Archer.
Yeah. But
one with IPL experience. And I think that spoke volumes for how the IPL, I think, has helped sort of the England cricket side, as you like, the international side, advance players with regards to performing on the big stage and also, in front of packed crowds, if you like, and performing under pressure.
I think it's invaluable. I mean, I've changed my opinion over the last 10 years quite dramatically on that. I think it's now invaluable to have that sort of experience under your belt.
Sorry, if I can just jump in. I also think it's a bit like county cricket when you always see overseas pros who come to county cricket, and that's the best learning school for any players to come and play county cricket for a season or in England. I think it's just moved to India on the IPL.
I mean, the only thing you have to say, of course, is in order to get experience playing in IPL, someone has to buy you, bid for you, buy you, and play you. I mean, Swan's point about Besto, for instance, he was going so strongly in IPL this season, then got left out. So it's all very well being in India, but you need to be playing, you need to be part of it, which might actually substantiate the validation, as it were, of the other leagues where you're more likely to get a game, which could include Pakistan, could include Bangladesh. I mean, there's so many, as you say, so many leagues around the place you can get experience, and of course that DOSH that Swanee was referring to. Coming out of that same discussion, another question from the floor, as it were, Rajiv Radhakrishnan. I don't think he's entirely a Jos Buttler fan. 249 test matches, averages 34 ? Is he picked on image? Definitely worth his place in white ball cricket, but he seems to get more leeway in tests. He's not a number 6, he says. How has he ever made vice captain? I'm definitely saying that Rajiv is not a Jos Buttler fan here, but I have heard so many good things about Jos, what he gives to the team, an unidentified quote, we say, from sources very close to the ECB, what he gives to the team in the dressing room and the rest of it. He has made runs in the last 12 months. He finished off that game the other day in great style. What does the panel think about Jos Buttler?
Can I go first on this one?
Yep.
Right, I've got an issue with it's something with that question. Jos is a good cricketer, and he does bring a lot off the field, and the unsubstantiated things that we don't know about, he brings to the team. He's bloody good at five-a-side football as well, so you need him in for that. One thing that really annoys me that has been brushed over, and I would love Jos to be put in the team for the reason he was picked. Do you remember when Ed Smith picked him? He said, because we want him to win test matches from no-win situations, to turn things on their head like both of them in 81 and everything. I don't think he's allowed to do that. When he goes out to bat, I don't see him, playing his reverse sweeps and getting 100 off 60 balls like he would in a one-day game. If he was doing that and given that license, I think England could be almost unbeatable. As it is, he's a good test batsman, but he doesn't average 50. It doesn't set the world alight as much as he does in one-day cricket. I'd love to see him doing the role that they picked him for in the first place. Go out there and bring a whole new level to Test cricket and a whole new image to it. But I don't think it'll ever happen.
But Jonathan, can you do that? I mean, Test match cricket gives you so many different situations. Learning to be a good Test player is more than just being Jos Buttler being Jos Buttler.
I think it's tricky in Test situations. There's always a lot more time, so you've got more options. So I think when you play T20s, it's the decisions made for you how you have to bat. Whereas in Test cricket, you have to decide yourself and weigh up the scenario, weigh up the pitch and the conditions. So I think for Jos, that's what he's sort of going through at the moment in his Test career. He's been in and out. And I think a lot of the time he feels a lot more comfortable in ODI cricket, but he's certainly becoming very influential and a very, very good Test player at the moment. The
but he is becoming a very good Test player in the old-fashioned sense. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
he's becoming very solid, rather than a brand new type of player who could just imagine if he just went in and teed off all the time, never got bollocked if it didn't go well, but would win you one Test per series like an Ian Botham job when you're way behind the 8 ball. Because I understood that was why he got picked in the first place.
That was a while ago, and I reckon you evolve a little bit as well. So I think that's what he's done.
Yeah.
But imagine he got out in a Test match trying to reverse sweep Jasper Bumrah, and you guys in the press, I don't think you're exactly going to be that kind to him.
No, but the whole point is when he was picked by Ed Smith, that's what they said he was going to do. That's what he was in for. That is Jos's comfort zone. That's why he's so good in one-day cricket. I was being devil's advocate a bit. I just think that.
Swann is right. When Ed Smith first unveiled his team in 2018, he said that Buttler should be an attacking number 7. Well, he hasn't always batted number 7. He's batted 5 and 6 quite often for England. And I think in that position, his role is clearly different. He's not a counter-attacking Botham-esque type player.
Yeah, exactly.
But the point I'd like to make, if you remind ourselves of the first Test against Pakistan when we chased down, I can't remember, I think it was 300 or two was high 200s. And he got an unbelievable innings on that wicket that was turning the way it was. The wickets before Ollie Pope got one that exploded off a length. Ben Stokes got one that exploded off a length. Jos Buttler and Chris Woakes got us a line. You don't feel as confident ever. You don't feel with anybody else at the wicket like Jos Buttler, do you feel as confident as you do that you're going to win a game when he walks out to bat in that situation? Then he gets 100 the next test.
I think you're dead right.
And then he finishes off the game now in the second. Is anybody else you would rather have at the wicket
normally
to finish off that game the other day than Jos Buttler?
No, but I think he could have done it differently a dozen times in his Test career if he'd gone out and been given license to tee off. I always remember getting 100 against India at Trent Bridge, and everyone said, "Oh, that is brilliant." All the commentary, brilliant. Jos Buttler, they've got a great 100 in a losing cause. I thought it was a situation where, just going off what Ed Smith had said, he could have gone out, maybe not come off, but if he'd got that 100 in half the time, England could have had a chance to win. I don't know. I'm not calling for Jos to be drop-trotted, but don't get me wrong. I love the fact that he's playing well. Yeah. He was picked to bring some X factor, and I don't think he's allowed to.
What I think we're seeing is what we're seeing is I think Jos evolving as a player himself and growing into maybe being a very good Test cricketer when normal Test cricket is called for, but when the situation is called for him to be the dynamic player that he is in one-day cricket in situations where it is to go and win a game like that.
He's been a finisher, and as Trott has just alluded to that, he was a finisher yesterday in Gaul, and he was a finisher in that game at Old Trafford against Pakistan. 2 brilliant innings, really, which in another era, he might have got out cheaply and England could have lost. They'd have just collapsed in a heap, but he counter-attacked, reverse sweeps, all that sort of stuff, and he turned a difficult task into
He did. He batted completely differently to how a traditional England batsman would have done in that position. Yeah. Sorry, I'm being a bit of a knob there.
We're used to it. I was going to say there's one slight flaw in that game plan, allowing Jos to get you out of trouble game after game after game. Because if you're engineering a game or planning a game, you'd rather not be in trouble in the first place. What about the keeper's position though? Because he's going to play the one Test match and go home. You've got Ben Foakes out there in India, who's a wonderful keeper, and has, when he's been given a chance before on a limited basis, has done a good job in Sri Lanka, for instance, on the previous tour. Where do we stand with the keeping dilemma at the moment? Simon?
Well, we've had an embarrassment of riches, but by the second test of this series, we'll be down to having only one, won't we, of those three? Because Bairstow will be out of the picture, and so will Joss. And they're trusting that Folkes will do okay. And what happens if he gets injured? I don't know. Is it bracing?
Only Pope, obviously, in reserve, but his shoulders.
Pope would do it, yeah. I mean, Folkes is a terrific cricketer, and he deserves another chance. He's had a long time in the bubble, though, hasn't he? This winter and last summer. So good luck to him. He's not played a lot of cricket in the middle, but that doesn't seem to matter these days. These guys are so good at practicing in the nets and preparing themselves, as England just demonstrated. Coming to Sri Lanka on nothing, basically. So good luck. I hope he does well. He's a terrific cricketer.
Okay, well, we'll see how that develops. As we said, we've made the point many a time already in this last hour that modern day selection has so many more aspects to it than the olden days, where basically you picked an 11 that was going to play in all 5 test matches. You took some reserves in case someone got ill, and you made adjustments as you went along. So a very, very different sort of era. Simon, while you're still there in full flight, a very important question here from Paul Smith, who's taken this all very seriously. He says, very impressed with Simon Wilde's wisdom collection. Are we back to a rotation test policy? I'm not quite sure whether that's linked to the Wisdens or the test matches, to be honest.
Oh, so what are we talking about? Wisdens or rotation?
I think actually you can acknowledge the presence of all your Wisdens there. How far back do they go, by the way?
1922 is my earliest one, David. I think you played, that was when you made your debut, wasn't it?
Correct. I can't remember the score. I'm sure it must have been the inaugural test match against someone. This rotational test policy, let's talk about that.
Well, shall I say something?
Yeah.
I've not got much to say.
Well, you can look it up in Wisdom if you want.
I mean, given bubble life, I don't see that we have a choice, really. I mean, these guys, we're talking about Bairstow being whipped out of the test matches now, and there's a bit of a sort of outcry about that. But the mental health of these guys is crucial, and they can't spend 90 days in a bubble. It's just not. It's not on. There is no choice. They've got to do this. And after this tour is over, they've got a long summer. They've got the IPL, but they've got a long summer, and then they've got a huge winter with the World T20 and an Ashes tour. I mean, the program is incredible. So managing their health is the top priority, I think. Really, I just think this is the way it is at the moment. We have no choice, and it's going to be, if they get through. If all these guys get through in one piece, great. I mean, that'll be a triumph in itself, to be honest.
Well, Jonathan's obviously got this week of quarantine in Chennai before they let him out of his room. Swanee is in Abu Dhabi. What's your sentence, Swanee, there?
Well, I'll be honest. Having played for England for that many years, you basically live in a bubble anyway. Now I'm doing homeschooling. I would live in an England bubble 1,000 days a year rather than do 2 days of homeschooling. So come on, let's just have some a little bit of sensibilities here. Homeschooling sucks. He's got to go home and be in a bubble anyway on his own, isolated. Get Johnny back in the test team. Get him out there. Come on. For England.
That's only because Swanee doesn't understand the maths questions that his son's doing in grade 3.
Yeah, the maths isn't the problem. It's when they talk about defensive stroke play. When are we doing that? I have no idea what Wilf's going on about.
What was that I saw about you, Swanee, the other day? It must have been Twitter or something valid like that, about the amount of time you're allowed to play sport with your children. You only last about 10 minutes before one of them goes off crying or something because you just launch yourself in a football.
It's because they know best. So my little boy Wilfred, he went to a very, very posh school, and they do rugger and fencing and all this. And I went to pick him up one day, and he said, "Dad, we did cricket today. We did off spin." Oh, that's brilliant. Show me how you held the ball. And he showed me, and it was obviously the English way of teaching, so it's completely wrong. And I said, no, try holding it like this instead. And he just looked me straight in the eyes, 8 years old. I said, "Dad, that's completely wrong," and walked off. So, I mean, if I can't even teach my son how to bowl off spin properly, what can I do?
Okay, well, let's assume then he won't be playing for England in 15 years' time, but wish him well when he's fencing against the Russians. That'd be nice.
I thought the Russians, it's the French fencers, they're the boys.
Right.
Dear God, don't you know anything, Gower? It's a long time since your public school days.
It's been so long. Tell me about French fencing then. Well, I only do estate fencing and sort of, a bit of post and rail.
Well, it's not called en garde for nothing, is it? I don't know. I pulled him out of that school. I'm not paying to homeschool that much money. Don't worry about that.
Indeed. All right. Okay, let's just keep an eye on the clock. We've got about 5 minutes to go. Right, gentlemen, what do we think is going to happen over the next couple of months in India? How's this going to pan out? Who wants to start that one? Jonathan?
I think it's going to be a fascinating series. I think it's going to be 1-1.
1-1.
Mm.
2 draws.
I'm thinking Joe Root is going to carry on and have the year of his life, and him and Virat Kohli are going to go on sort of a one-man per team batting escapade. It's going to come down to the nitty-gritty of the spinners, and I think Ravichandra Ashwin is going to pinch it for India. 2-1.
2-1. Okay, so the draw somewhere. Simon?
I think England will do better than we think they might, because given what happened 4 years ago, not many of us in the press box, it's a virtual press box these days, of course, would give them much chance. But I think they'll do better than we think. It could be, I mean, it might be 2-1 to India. I think I can see England nicking one somewhere, perhaps the pink ball test. That would suggest that possibly that might give them the best chance. But I think they'll do better. I think they'll do better than we think. And I think also India may, in a sense, have gone through such an emotional high in Australia that there might be a bit like in 05 when England won the Ashes and then went to Pakistan and lost. There might just be a sort of little bit of a dip, like
after the Lord Mayor's show. I love it.
What do we do? What do we do now, sort of thing? What do we do the rest of our lives? We've done the ultimate thing. So possibly England might benefit from that.
Well, they might have. It's not the first time they won in Australia, albeit the circumstances this time were pretty dramatic. And we have to take our collective hats off to the way India both survived and then won in Australia this time. But let's face it, I mean, there is a certain tradition, a bit like the special relationship that we're now rebuilding with Joe Biden in the States. There's a certain tradition that India versus England has a lot riding on it. I mean, Stone, let's face it, there's a lot of history here.
Absolutely, and listen, and all the other teams, international teams, they love beating England as well. So it's a big thing for India. It's going to be a serious four Test match series, and then not forget the Indians are coming back over here next December for a series as well. I'm looking forward. I was quite impressed. Obviously, they've got some quality players. I was quite impressed with their new opening batsman, Shubman Gill. He looks like a modern day version of Virender Sehwag. He stands leg side of the ball and wafts his hands through. He looks quite exciting. So I'm looking forward to seeing how he copes with the likes of Anderson and Broad. And so that's going to be an interesting. I think it's going to be a good Test series, as they all are. And but I can see us nicking that day-night Test match and putting them under some pressure. But it's going to be a tough one to win.
I'll tell you what, DJ, may I just say before I go that I think the most important thing is none of the players have stubble whatsoever during this trip. I think we need to get back to the good old England tour of India when all the players are getting in trouble by Gucci for not shaving and not wearing their blazers. That's what we need to get back to. Pettiness.
My God.
So I'm in isolation. I'm going crazy.
You were so desperate to shoehorn that in, weren't you? Okay, final question on this. I mean, apart from the, as it were, the traditional, historical, bilateral Test series importance of winning a series, trying to win a series, there is also the added bonus, if you want to call it that, of the World Test Championship. Now, if, for instance, New Zealand, don't forget New Zealand are at the top of the tree at the moment, whatever you think about the real status between them, India and the rest of it. But it needs England to do well in this series if they're going to have any chance of that World Test Championship final, doesn't it? Simon, let's try you.
I mean, I think I read that England have to win this series 3-0 to leapfrog New Zealand, perhaps, or even India. I can't see that. I can't see that happening. So I think England might be looking on when the World Test Championship final happens at the Rose Bowl or wherever it is, Ageas Bowl, I should say, in June.
Do keep up. Come on, we live in Hampshire. We've got to.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, so I think it's a long shot for England, a real long shot.
What do we actually think though of the World Test Championship as a concept? Because it's hardly. I mean, only when they get to Ageas Bowl, wherever they're going to hold this final next summer, will someone realise it's on. I think, because it seems to be in such a sort of low key thing. Although yes, people will put tables up on Cricinfo and in the newspapers, and it'll come up as a discussion point like this. I mean, it seems to be a very low key thing in the end, doesn't it?
It's a nice idea.
Well, I think once they get the point system sorted out, it'll be okay.
I like the idea of every test match, wherever it's being played, having a value. Whether it be a bilateral series or unilateral, it has a value, but it's an evolving process that they're going through, and hopefully in 3-4 years down the line, it might just get to a situation where it really has a real proper input into what's going on in international cricket. Yeah.
Okay, well, gentlemen, I think time is up. We've done an hour. So thank you very much indeed yet again to our panelists, this time to Jonathan, to Simon, to Swanee, and of course, as ever, to Gladstone. Thank you very much again to all of you who've joined us for this webinar, asked questions. We've not answered all of them. Apologies for that, but we got through, one way or another, we got through quite a few of them. But on behalf of both Black Opal and the Lord's Taverners, as their president again, just to remind you, we're looking forward to an event happening at some stage in the next 24 months in order to try and raise the money for the Lord's Taverners. But on behalf of all of us and all of you, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and let's look forward to the next one.